Marina Strinkovsky.
Thank you. Is this on? Y'all can hear me? Okay. Thank you so much for inviting me. This is my Scottish feminism debut, so I'm very, very excited. Ooh. Amazing turnout. Well done, everybody. So they put me right after lunch when you're all like really full and relaxed, a bit sleepy, to do the history bit, which is the boring thing. So relax into it. So the one thing that everybody knows about feminism is that it comes in waves, like whole flushes. First we got vote, then we burned some bras, and now snot-nosed kids are telling us they don't even want to identify as feminists anymore. Also, middle-aged lesbians are actual fascists. Common knowledge. But hang on a minute. Feminism is the largest and most radical political movement in the history of humanity. It acts on behalf of half of all people in the world, and its ambition is to analyze and reform some of the most intimate and foundational institutions we have, like the family, spiritual practices, and our understanding of both men and women as social subjects and social agents. So maybe there's more to it than wave surfing. Historian Gerda Lerner wrote that one of the greatest injustices perpetrated against women is depriving us of our history. This theft is not only a consequence of patriarchy, but also part of its supporting structures. Because people with no shared or cultural or political history are going to find it very difficult to imagine a shared present and to build a shared future. So it's not a courtesy or a politeness to women who came before us for us to understand how they thought, what they fought for, who they fought with, which was very often each other, and what motivated them to get started in the first place. It's not a nice to have, it's politics. Considering the sheer breathtaking size of feminism, it is quite surprising that it's a movement barely 200 years old. Now make no mistake, there was no pre-feminist idyll when women were satisfied with their lot and made no complaint about the exploitation and injustice that we were subjected to. Women have always known that we get a raw deal. But feminism, understood as a coherent set of principles and a coherent set of political aims, organized loosely into institutions, is a very recent phenomenon. So what did finally spur women to step into history and start moving the furniture around? I will argue that women gradually came into consciousness of ourselves as participants in several historical processes, and that we responded in coherent and serious ways to four civilizational cataclysms that have reshaped the social landscape since the Middle Ages. At first hesitant, but growing in confidence, women were able to imagine ourselves into these four changes and use them to make four parallel demands for equality. Women began to see themselves as worthy participants in liberatory projects that were being enacted around them for and by men. And the critical development was not that women understood what was wrong with their lives, but that they built an intellectual framework within which repairs could begin. Okay, so now, bear with me, this is the boring historical bit. I read it out in the car. It takes about 7 minutes, so if anybody needs the loo or on YouTube wants to jump ahead, this is come back. As I said, there were four different demands from women about the way that we were treated. And these corresponded roughly to four major paradigm shifts that consecutively reshaped modernity: the Reformation, the Enlightenment, the Age of Revolution, and World War I. The first of these was the demand for moral equality. You can think of it as the right to have rights. The Reformation changed the way people thought about their relationship with God. You could make an argument that it eventually led to secularism, but it wasn't, of course, a secular thing at all. It was profoundly spiritual. And one of its key claims was that every Christian person, every Christian anywhere, can have a personal relationship with God. It doesn't strain the imagination to see how women, encouraged to read the Bible and develop personal piety, started thinking of themselves as independent spiritual agents, as moral actors. Women such as Emilia Lanier and Rachel Specht, this started kind of in Germany because the Reformation was strong there. began to push back against the view that women are the root of all sin. And they started writing things that reminded their readers that Christ offered salvation to all on equal terms, and that, yeah, Eve may have offered Adam the apple, but you shouldn't make him eat it, right? Different sects, like Quakers and other dissenting groups, also sometimes offered women more equal place in spiritual practice and occasionally even leadership. I think it can be hard for us living in a secular world to understand the audacity of women pushing back against the moral stain that they were expected to be ashamed of. But arguably, without that first step, feminism proper could never have developed. The second epoch was the epoch of demands of intellectual equality. You can think of it as an argument that women possess the capacity to have rights. Roughly coextensive with the 18th century, this period saw a general increase in the number of women staking a claim to the same mental and cognitive capacities as men. Not yet demanding universal education, but laying critical groundwork for the acceptance of women as being, in principle, educable. Education and learning were seen as social and moral goods by the Enlightenment, and women such as Mary Astle and Catherine Macaulay stepped into this discourse to argue that women should have their fair share. Astle in particular deserves to be better known, by the way, because she was a prolific writer and aspired to the creation of something like a secular convent, a city of women, a place for women to learn, think, and write without any men present. She was super anti-marriage and anti-men. In this way, she can be considered the intellectual godmother of both women-only spaces and political lesbianism. Anyway, one way or another, between 1699 and 1729, so it's 30 years, 132 schools for girls were set up in London and Westminster alone, and many more around the country. Women were not merely agitating for female education, but putting their demands into practice. A collaboration between writer-theorists and entrepreneur activists that is still the dominant model of feminist progress today. It's the third epoch where I believe feminism proper began. The key demand here was for political equality, not just a vote, which actually as a demand was articulated rather late in this broader period, but the fight for equal status under the law, for standing in court to give evidence and to be heard, to sue, and for the legal right to own property. This was the fight for the right to use rights, without which all of the education in the world wouldn't come to terribly much as far as the lives of actual women were concerned. Here the key question was not, or not only, whether individual women were worthy of certain statuses or certain goods, but whether the state as a whole can be considered functional and coherent if women are excluded from it. In a post-revolutionary world where citizenship was being re-anchored in statewide institutions like constitutions, legal systems, bills of rights, and free public debate, rather than consisting in the degree of personal proximity to power, which was the way it worked in the feudal world, women were quick to point out the inconsistency and incoherence of only applying all of those principles that animated the American War of Independence and the French Revolution to half of humanity. It is this move from advocating for women as supplicants to individual things, I'm smart enough, I'm good enough, I'm not evil, I'm not stupid, to attacking the system, right, as critics, that I consider to be the birth of feminism. At this point, I want to pause and just say something about the French Revolution and how it connects to feminism. Probably notice that here I am merely at the suffragettes. I've already mentioned the vote, and I haven't so much as said the name Mary Wollstonecraft. By many accounts, she is the feminist, the first, the OG, the mother of the movement. And in some ways, many ways, she was. But she was also a transitional figure, someone who wrote passionately about women's education, like she was still in the 18th century, which of course she was born in the 18th century, but who lived and thought in the shadow of the French Revolution, and whose political radicalism actually anticipated the 19th century. Wollstonecraft experienced the energy and the terror of the revolution firsthand because she was in Paris for some of the relevant time. And while there, she was influenced by the thinking of, among others, Olympe de Gouges, a playwright and slavery abolitionist who published a pamphlet called Declaration of the Rights of Woman and of the Female Citizen, for the first time explicitly demanding that women be included in the political upheavals of the Age of Revolution. She wrote that a woman has the right to mount the scaffold. She must possess equally the right to mount the speaker's platform, exposing the failure of the revolutionary regime to recognize gender equality as an aim of liberation. Needless to say, they cut off her head for being a petite, but the precedent was set. Other women, Macaulay and Wollstonecraft among them, but also American suffragists, entered into dialogue with de Gouges and drew on her work. It is no coincidence that Wollstonecraft's A Vindication of the Rights of Women and the Declaration of Sentiments written by Elizabeth Cady Stanton, who's an American suffragist, later in the 19th century, deliberately play on the title of de Gouges' pamphlet. To come back to the chronological order and move to the next great epoch in feminism, and I got some criticism from my boyfriend that this doesn't quite roll off the tongue, but it's the struggle for the right to hold our rights independently of men. And this occupied much of the 20th century and has arguably made the most visible alterations to the fabric of society, from what families look like to who is visible and active in the public sphere. The 20th century began with the enormous upheaval of the First World War. In ways that are difficult to imagine now, World War I changed the whole landscape of Europe, and because of colonialism, it also reshaped much of the rest of the world. It also killed an awful lot of people, most of them men. It's interesting to me that we tend to be very familiar with the story, the narrative of women who worked in industry and in the civil service during World War II, and then they were all sent back home, sent back to the kitchen because the men came home, right? But we're a lot less well acquainted with the women of the generation before them, who never did go back to the kitchen because they didn't have any men to feed. Given that these women were morally confident, often educated, and legally emancipated to a certain degree, this was a genie that was very hard to put back in the bottle. Almost everything we think of as the formal achievements of feminism in the 20th century, equal employment rights, maternity benefits, laws against sexual violence, the right to abortion and contraception, the whole lot, is completely contingent on the interests and thoughts and needs of the women who had come before. It's an interesting counterfactual to try and imagine what women's status in the Western world would look like today if the Reformation or the Scientific Revolution or the French Revolution had not happened. Would our priorities have been different? Would we be fighting for different things? Would some of the untaken paths of things like socialist feminism or ecofeminism be the dominant paradigms for feminism today? We don't know, but it's an interesting thought. Now, these four battles, the appeal for the right to have rights, the argument for women's capacity to use rights, the long fight to be granted our rights in practice, and the ongoing struggle to use our rights independently of male control, cannot and should not be called waves. I don't know who first came up with that metaphor, but it is very misleading because it creates a mental image that is wrong in two key particulars. First, you imagine that each wave recedes completely before the next one surges. And second, that in between these two crests, the sea, as it were, is quiet. Neither of these things is true at all. In fact, each of the above described steps in the development of a feminist politics operate in what can be better visualized as a spiral staircase. We're striving ever upwards, but we're always meeting ourselves on the way, always passing the same landmarks, articulating the same truths, carrying on the same struggle. After all, the appeal of late medieval and early modern women to spiritual equality is still not recognized by the vast majority of world religions, including ones dominant in Europe, like Catholicism. The education of girls is by no means a universal reality, up to and including in our British classrooms, where they face little official opposition, but many subtle obstacles. And we are nowhere equally politically represented. In fact, the female PM of the first country in the world to give women the vote, New Zealand, has just stepped down, citing burnout. It hasn't become easy to be a woman in politics. And a right to an economic existence independent of male control, where it's even nominally recognized, which is again far from everywhere, is heavily burdened by the fact that we are practically and economically saddled with almost all of the responsibility for making new humans and then keeping them alive until they learn to use a washing machine. It is no coincidence that the price of childcare outside the home is counted in fractions or multiples of a woman's salary in every developed nation. So when I say that feminism is developed in response to civilizational processes, I don't mean to imply that in each case we had an open and shut situation, done deal. Feminism, a lot like housework, is not something that can be finished. The fact that women go to demos and hold up signs saying, "I can't believe I still have to protest this shit," isn't a bug, it's a feature. We always have to protest this shit. It's just the way both the shit and the protests express themselves, interact with other things that are going on in the world at the time. We reclaim our history in order to know our history, but also in order to remind ourselves that we are agents in history right now. We are always making and remaking history as feminists. Now, when looking at more recent decades, the last decades, and certainly the last years, and in Scotland's case, the last few months, of the movement, it's very tempting to get fixated on details. Was the Abortion Act the most important legal victory of the 20th century, or was it the 1994 rape and marriage law? Who was worse, Betty Friedan or Gloria Steinem? Were the 1990s a time that feminism forgot, and what the living hell was Camille Paglia all about? Which magazine is more dangerous for women, Loaded or Pink News? If you think it's an easy question, it's really not. It's also important because we don't progress in leaps and bounds. Like we don't just wake up and do the Reformation, like I'm saying in this talk, right? We progress in tiny steps, always on that spiral staircase, always one step at a time, always meeting and reevaluating old problems and new guises. So no by any means talking down the work of campaigners who zero in on one issue, one law, one country. In fact, I admire them enormously, and some of the ones I admire the most are in the room today. Hi, Lucy. But it's also important to take a step back and look at the overall picture for several reasons. One is that we have to give ourselves credit for how far we've come. In under 250 years, we've analyzed, critiqued, and in many cases overturned patriarchal dynamics that govern women's lives virtually unchallenged for all of recorded history, and probably long before. Another is that looking at where we've come from can help us understand where to go to next. To some extent, as I've tried to show in this talk, we are carried along by historical forces. The Reformation and the French Revolution happened to everybody, but women also turned them into opportunities. Today we have other forces that are driving the planetary bus. Climate change, economic globalization, the energy transition, and completely unprecedented and unpredictable effects of women's reproductive control on world population. This last thing, which we talk about surprisingly little, is driving population decline on an already cataclysmic scale. Like the actual, one of the main dangers, like risks cited to China's GDP growth is that they haven't got enough people because women are not having them. Like, we're not making them. Everything is made in China except that. Now, this has never happened before, ever. Women have never been the primary deciding force in the size of humanity. Things like hunger and disease and war were always the determining factors. But the decline in fertility per woman that we've been living through is introducing completely completely unprecedented historical force, which we should also contend with. So where do we want to be positioned in relation to these forces? At the micro level, we must continue to fight for women to be supported through climate transition, as victims of war, and as peace negotiators, as economic and political agents in developing nations, and everything that we're doing in this country too. Plus all the same old battles for education, for safety, for liberation. But at the macro level, where is feminism going? Now, I don't want to disappoint anybody, but I don't know. I don't pretend to be qualified to give an answer. And I don't think any one woman is. One of my most respected feminist mentors, Professor Liz Kelly, says that feminism is a tapestry. Every woman brings her own thread and weaves it into place in the overall pattern. The question of the future of feminism is still to be woven, but we can all benefit from, and more crucially, draw strength and pleasure from stepping back and admiring the design that has been created so far.